sushi chef asked me to come back when my husband was out of town because his wasabi is spicy. I never thought I'd be one of those women who spill their guts on Reddit about their personal drama, but here I am. I guess it all started a few months ago, on a random Thursday night when I wandered into a sushi restaurant alone for the first time in a long while. It's funny how the smallest decisions can completely change the course of your life, isn't it? I wasn't really in the mood for sushi, to be honest, but my husband Tom had gone out of town on a business trip, and I was craving something other than our usual takeout routine. Let me rewind a bit. Tom and I have been married for 3 years, together for 5. We met through a mutual friend at a work event. I was new to the city at the time, trying to figure things out on my own. Fresh out of grad school, barely unpacked in my overpriced one-bedroom apartment, and spending my days navigating a job I wasn't sure I even liked. At that event, everyone seemed to know each other, talking business jargon and making connections, and there I was, standing awkwardly by the buffet table, trying to pretend I belonged. Tom was different. He wasn't flashy or overly confident like a lot of the other guys there, but he had this easygoing vibe that drew me in. He cracked a joke about the sad-looking canapes, and I laughed harder than I should have, probably out of sheer relief to be talking to someone normal. We spent most of the night chatting, away from the work talk, just about random stuff. Favorite movies, terrible bosses, and whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It wasn't some whirlwind romance, though. We didn't immediately fall madly in love or anything like that. Tom was nice, steady, reliable, and the kind of guy you could count on. I liked that about him. After dating a string of guys who were all over the place, his calmness felt refreshing. He was stable in a way I hadn't realized I needed. He knew what he wanted in life, and it was simple. A good job, a nice house, weekend BBQs with friends, the kind of predictable but comfortable life that a lot of people dream of. So we dated for about 2 years before he proposed. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a quiet dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. He didn't go down on one knee or make a big scene. He just slid the ring across the table with this nervous smile, like he wasn't sure what my answer would be. But of course I said yes. It made sense. We were good together, and marriage seemed like the next logical step. We bought a house, settled into a routine, and life was fine. It was good even. Tom worked a lot, but he always made time for us. We had our weekly date nights, took weekend trips when we could, and spent Sunday mornings lazing around with coffee and the newspaper. But lately, I don't know. Something started to feel off. It wasn't anything Tom did, really. He was still the same guy I married, still caring, still steady. But I started to feel restless, like maybe this wasn't enough. Maybe I wasn't enough. I told myself it was just a phase, something everyone goes through in a long-term relationship. We were fine, happy even, right? And then came the sushi night. I was sitting at the bar, scrolling through my phone, when the chef behind the counter asked me if I wanted anything special. He was this hot guy, maybe a bit younger than me, with a playful smirk and a confidence that I immediately noticed. I ordered my usual, but he raised an eyebrow and asked if I was up for something spicier. "Our wasabi is intense," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Maybe you should come back when your husband's out of town so you can really enjoy it." I laughed at first, thinking it was just some weird, flirty banter. I mean, who says something like that? But there was a split second when I caught his gaze, and it didn't feel like just a joke. My cheeks flushed, and I quickly looked away, brushing it off. I wasn't some bored housewife looking for trouble. I paid my bill, left a tip, and got out of there, feeling a bit shaken, but still telling myself it was nothing. But that one comment stuck with me. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about him, about how something so small, so innocent, could throw me off balance like that. It was like a tiny crack in the perfect life I thought I had, and I couldn't unsee it. Of course, I didn't tell Tom about it. Why would I? It wasn't a big deal, right? I wasn't the type to go down that path. I loved my husband. I did. But there was this tiny part of me that felt tempted. It wasn't just about the chef or the wasabi or whatever. It was more than that. It was about this feeling that I was missing something, that maybe I had settled for the safe, predictable life too soon. Tom was still away on his trip, sending me sweet texts about how much he missed me, and I felt awful. Here I was, married to this wonderful guy, and I was entertaining these stupid thoughts about a random sushi chef. I tried to shake it off, focus on work, keep busy, but every time my mind wandered, I found myself thinking about that damn sushi place. It wasn't until Tom came back that I felt a little more grounded. We slipped back into our routine. Netflix, takeout, and walks in the park. Everything felt normal again. But the restlessness didn't completely go away. It was like this low hum in the background of my life, something I couldn't quite ignore. I know this probably sounds ridiculous. I mean, one comment from a stranger and suddenly I'm questioning my whole marriage? It sounds crazy. Trust me, I feel crazy even writing this. But maybe that's why I'm here, spilling it all to a bunch of strangers on the internet. Maybe I just need to get it out, to make sense of it somehow. I didn't go back to the sushi place right away. In fact, I tried my best to avoid it altogether. It felt safer to stick to my usual spots, the places I knew, where everything was predictable and comfortable. I told myself that little encounter wasn't important, that it was just a passing thought. But the thing about thoughts like that is, once they're in your head, they're impossible to shake. Tom and I went on like normal. We had dinner, watched our shows, talked about our days. He was as attentive as always, but I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way he'd scroll through his phone while I was talking, or how he'd nod and smile but didn't really seem to be listening. I knew I was being unfair. He was tired from work, and I wasn't exactly bringing anything exciting to the table. Still, the small cracks in our routine that had always been there suddenly felt bigger, harder to ignore. One afternoon, about a week after my first visit to the sushi bar, I found myself walking by it again. I wasn't planning to go in. I was just running errands, minding my own business. But before I knew it, I was standing outside staring at the door. I hesitated for a good 5 minutes, telling myself that going in didn't mean anything. It was just lunch. Just sushi. Nothing more. So I went in. The restaurant was quieter than it had been last time, the lunchtime rush just dying down. I sat at the bar again, telling myself this was all just a big coincidence. The same chef was there, and when he saw me, he smiled like he'd been expecting me. I tried to play it cool, but there was no denying the tension between us now. It was different from the casual banter I'd brushed off before. This felt like something hanging in the air, something I was choosing not to walk away from. "What can I get you this time?" he asked, leaning in slightly, his voice low enough that it felt almost conspiratorial. "I'll stick with the usual," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He didn't push it, just nodded and went to work. As I watched him, I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he moved, how confident he seemed. It was hard not to compare him to Tom. Tom, who was always so careful, so methodical, while this guy had a kind of recklessness that drew me in. I hated myself a little for even thinking about it, but I couldn't stop. Something about him intrigued me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. When he handed me the plate, he paused, his eyes meeting mine for a second too long. "I made it a little spicier this time," he said with that same smirk. "Let's see if you did a good job." I blinked obliviously like I wasn't even trying to flirt, until he responded with a smirk. "All my jobs are good." I swallowed, feeling a knot form in my stomach. This was a bad idea, and I knew it. But instead of getting up and leaving, I stayed. I ate my sushi, made small talk, and laughed at his jokes, pretending like this was all innocent. But deep down, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was flirting with the edge of something dangerous, daring myself to see how far I could go. By the time I finished, I could feel the weight of what was happening. I left the restaurant that day with a pit in my stomach, telling myself I wouldn't come back again. But we all know how these things go. The next few weeks were a blur of confusion and guilt. Tom was as oblivious as ever, still wrapped up in work, still happy with our routine. And I was torn between wanting to stay in the safety of what I knew and the pull of something new, something reckless. I couldn't stop thinking about the sushi chef, about that stupid, flirtatious grin, about the way he looked at me like he knew something I didn't. I started making excuses to go back. First, it was for lunch just once more, then again because I was in the area. Before I knew it, I was a regular. Every time I went, it was the same flirting tension, but nothing crossing the line. Yet, it felt like I was playing with fire, but I wasn't ready to admit I was already burning. One night after Tom had gone to bed, I found myself lying awake, my mind racing. I was restless, the kind of restless that made you want to run away from everything familiar. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through mindless social media posts, but nothing could distract me from the nagging feeling that I was about to do something stupid. I checked the time, almost midnight. The sushi place would be closing soon. I should go to sleep, I thought. But instead, I found myself getting up, grabbing my jacket and heading out the door without even thinking. The streets were quiet as I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was holding on to some last shred of self-control. When I got there, the place was almost empty, save for a couple of late-night stragglers finishing up their meals. He was still behind the bar, wiping down the counters, and when he saw me, his expression shifted. His face seemed surprised, followed by that familiar smirk. "You're back," he said, his voice low and teasing. "Thought you'd come at a more appropriate time." My heart was pounding. What the hell was I doing here? I just wanted to grab something quick," I stammered, suddenly feeling ridiculous. He leaned on the counter closer than before. "You sure that's all?" His words hung in the air, and for a moment everything felt suspended. This was it. This was the moment where I could either walk away, go back to my safe, predictable life, or take that step over the line. I stood there, frozen, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I didn't say anything, but I didn't leave either. "Look," he said, his voice softer now, "I'm not trying to make things complicated for you, but if you're here, I'm guessing you want something more than sushi." His words hit me like a punch. He was right. This wasn't about sushi. It hadn't been for a long time. I didn't know what I wanted, or maybe I did, but I wasn't ready to admit it. All I knew was that standing there in that dimly lit restaurant, everything felt charged, like the air between us could spark at any second. "I'm off in 10 minutes. If you want, you can wait for me. But if you actually want sushi, this is your last chance because we're closing up," he said, noticing I was too quiet. "I'll be in my car. It's the black Prius parked in the front." I got up smiling. He winked at me and I turned around to leave and also to hide my blushing face. Exactly 10 minutes later, he gently knocked on my window to not scare me while getting in. Once he was finally in my passenger seat, I felt a huge heat wave through my body. "I've been wondering when you'd come to see me for real. I thought you wouldn't be brave enough." He almost whispered and finished his words laughing. "I realized you weren't going to do much about the signals I've been sending," I answered. "Well, if a married woman wants me, she's going to have to come to me, in all senses possible." I couldn't help but let a shy smile out with his boyish joke, until I realized him looking at my golden ring, which led me to look at it too. "So, not really working out?" he asked. "Don't really want to talk about it." I let the last thread of courage in my body impulse me to kiss him. I had an extremely handsome guy in my car only for one night, maybe more if the guilt didn't consume me. Either way, it had to be worth it. 2 days later, Tom came home early from work, something he never did, and I wasn't ready for it. I had just stepped out of the shower, my phone buzzing on the counter with a text from the sushi chef. My heart stopped for a moment when I saw his name flash on the screen, and then I heard Tom's footsteps in the hallway. Panic set in. I snatched the phone up, fumbling to close the message thread, but I was too slow. Tom walked into the bedroom, a tired smile on his face. "Hey, you're home early too," he said, not knowing about the storm about to hit. I stood there, dripping water onto the floor, frozen in place with my phone clutched too tightly in my hand. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing. I tried to smile, tried to act normal, but it was no use. The guilt that had been building up inside me over the last few weeks was finally too much to hide. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, his eyes dropped to my phone. I could see the moment everything changed. The instant his casual, loving expression hardened. "Who's texting you?" he asked, his voice sharp. I could feel my pulse quickening, that sinking feeling in my gut telling me I'd been caught. "Just a friend," I muttered, knowing how weak that sounded. Tom wasn't an idiot. He took a step closer, his eyes boring into mine. "Let me see." I hesitated. For a split second, I thought about lying, about brushing it off and pretending like nothing was wrong. But then, in a moment of desperation, I handed him the phone. He didn't say anything as he unlocked it and scrolled through the messages, his face growing more and more tense with each passing second. When he finally looked up at me, I could see the hurt in his eyes mixed with anger. "Are you serious right now? Is this what I think it is?" "It's not what it looks like," I stammered, taking a step back, trying to find a way out of the mess I'd created. Tom threw the phone onto the bed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "Not what it looks like? You've been texting some guy behind my back, meeting up with him, and you think you can stand there and tell me it's nothing?" His voice was louder now, angrier than I'd ever heard him before. My chest tightened, and I could feel my throat closing up. "Tom, please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Didn't mean for what to happen? What, you just accidentally started flirting with some random guy? Accidentally kept going back to see him? Do you even hear yourself right now?" I couldn't respond. What could I say? I had no defense, no excuse that could justify what I'd done. I had betrayed him, plain and simple, and now I was standing there, watching as the person I loved the most in the world shattered right in front of me. "I've given you everything," he said, his voice cracking. "I've been nothing but good to you. And this is how you repay me? You throw it all away for some guy at a sushi bar?" His words hit me like a slap to the face, and tears welled up in my eyes. I tried to step toward him to reach out and explain, but he recoiled from me like I was poison. "Don't you dare," he snapped, his eyes blazing with anger. "Don't even try to make this better. You've already ruined everything." I was sobbing now, the weight of what I'd done crashing down on me all at once. "Tom, I'm sorry. Sorry?" He laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the fact that you've been sneaking around, lying to my face." I couldn't stop crying, my words coming out in broken gasps. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was feeling lost. I didn't know what to do, and I—" "Spare me," he said, cutting me off. "You didn't feel lost. You were selfish. You wanted attention, and you didn't care what it cost. You didn't care about me. About us." There was nothing I could say to that because he was right. I had been selfish, and now I was paying for it. Tom turned away from me, pacing the room like he couldn't stand to be in the same space as me anymore. I tried to approach him again, but he held up his hand, stopping me. "Do you even understand what you've done?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still laced with anger. "Do you realize how much you've hurt me? How much you've destroyed everything we've built?" "I know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you. But please, Tom, we can work through this. We can—" "No," he said, cutting me off again. "We can't. I don't even know who you are anymore." His words were like a punch to the gut, and I felt myself crumbling under the weight of my own mistakes. I had lost him. I could see it in his eyes. The man who had once looked at me with so much love and trust was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't even stand to be near me. "I can't do this," he said after a long pause, his voice heavy with finality. "I can't be with someone who could betray me like this. I deserve better than that." I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him I would do anything to fix what I had broken. But the words wouldn't come. All I could do was stand there, my heart in pieces, as he walked out of the room, out of our life, leaving me behind in the mess I had created. The door slammed shut and I collapsed onto the bed, my sobs uncontrollable. The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time I truly understood what it meant to feel alone. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. No matter what I said or did, I had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. Tom was gone, and I had no one to blame but myself. Update. It's been 6 months since everything went down, and to say my life has changed would be an understatement. I never thought I'd be one of those people posting on Reddit about how badly I screwed up. But here I am, living proof that you can ruin everything in the blink of an eye and still be stuck dealing with the fallout months later. After Tom left, things got ugly fast. He moved out the same night we had that fight, crashing at a friend's place. The next day, I got a text from him saying he wanted a divorce. I hadn't even had time to process what had happened, let alone the fact that our marriage was over. But there it was, in black and white. No room for negotiation, no second chances. I tried to reach out, tried calling, texting, emailing, anything I could think of to get him to talk to me. I was desperate to fix it, to explain myself, but he shut me down every time. It became clear pretty quickly that he had no interest in hearing what I had to say. I don't blame him. I mean, why would he? I had destroyed his trust, shattered the foundation of our relationship. There was no going back, and I think I knew that deep down, but it didn't stop me from trying. The divorce process was brutal. Tom didn't want to drag things out, so he went straight for the legal route, which meant lawyers, paperwork, and endless back-and-forth emails. Every time I got a new message from my lawyer, it felt like another punch to the gut. We had shared a life, a home, and now it was being torn apart piece by piece. I won't lie, I spiraled. For the first few weeks after Tom left, I barely left the house. I couldn't face anyone, friends, family, or coworkers. It was too much. I was drowning in guilt and shame, and the weight of my mistakes felt suffocating. I would wake up in the middle of the night, reach for Tom, and realize he wasn't there. That's when it would hit me all over again. I had destroyed everything. To make matters worse, the sushi chef, him, ghosted me. After everything that happened with Tom, I tried reaching out to him, thinking maybe I could make something out of the mess I'd created. But he didn't respond. Not to my texts, not to my calls. He completely disappeared. Looking back, I can see how naive and stupid I was to think he cared about me in any real way. It was never about me. It was just a game to him, a bit of fun. And when things got serious, he bailed. In the end, I was left with nothing. No husband, no relationship, just a pile of broken pieces I had to figure out how to put back together on my own. As for Tom, I heard through mutual friends that he's doing okay. He moved into a new apartment downtown and is apparently throwing himself into work. People say he seems fine, but I can't help but wonder how much of that is a front. I know I hurt him badly, and it kills me to think about how much pain I caused someone who never deserved any of this. A few weeks ago, I ran into one of his friends at the grocery store. We made small talk, awkward and strained small talk, and then she dropped the bomb. Tom's seeing someone new. I didn't ask for details, but the look on her face told me enough. It's serious. That hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. I mean, I knew it was inevitable that he'd move on, but hearing it out loud, knowing there's someone else in his life now, it felt like the final nail in the coffin. I don't blame him for moving on. He deserves to be happy, to be with someone who won't make the same mistakes I did. But that doesn't make it any easier to swallow. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. I've started going out again, reconnecting with friends, trying to rebuild some semblance of a life. I've even been on a couple of dates, but nothing serious. I'm not ready for that yet, and honestly, I don't know when or if I ever will be. Trust doesn't come easy anymore, not after everything that's happened. There are still days when the guilt hits me hard, when I lie in bed thinking about all the ways I could have done things differently. If I had just talked to Tom, if I had been honest about how I was feeling, maybe we could have worked through it together. But I didn't, and now I have to live with the consequences of my actions. I guess that's the hardest part, knowing that this is all my fault. I hurt the person I loved the most in the world, and for what? A meaningless fling with a guy who didn't care about me at all. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I'm learning to accept it slowly but surely. So that's where I'm at now. Trying to pick up the pieces, trying to move forward. It's not easy, and I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself for what I did, but I'm trying. That's all I can do. To anyone reading this and thinking about crossing that line, don't. It's not worth it. Trust me. Whatever fleeting excitement you think you'll get from it isn't worth the destruction that follows. I learned that the hard way, and I wouldn't wish this kind of regret on anyone. I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe one day I'll find someone new. Maybe I won't. But for now, I'm just focusing on myself, on becoming a better person, so that if I ever do get another chance at love, I won't make the same mistakes twice.